My name is Natalie, and I just turned 32 last month. After being thrown out at 16 and building my life from nothing, I never expected to open my door and find my father standing there after 15 years of silence. The shock of seeing him again was nothing compared to what came out of his mouth. He wanted me to give my house, the one I worked 80-hour weeks to afford, to my stepsister Amanda. The same family that threw me away now wanted what I built. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took you for granted. The morning my father showed up began like any other Sunday. I was enjoying coffee on my deck, overlooking the garden I had meticulously designed myself. My 3-bedroom craftsman-style home sits on a quiet street in a neighborhood I once could only dream of affording. The wide oak floors, open kitchen with marble countertops, and the reading nook by the bay window were all details I had carefully chosen when I purchased it 2 years ago. This house represented everything I had fought for since that rainy night when I was 16. After 15 years of relentless work, my real estate agency has become one of the most respected in the area. Starting as a receptionist and working my way up, I now have a team of 8 agents working under me. My specialization in helping first-time homebuyers has given me a reputation for honesty and dedication that brings clients through referrals alone. Last year, we closed over $15 million in sales, and I was featured in the local business journal as one of the top 40 under 40 entrepreneurs. The material success means something to me, I won't lie. But what matters more is the stability I created. My home is my sanctuary. Each morning begins with a 5-mile run with my rescue dog Cooper, a golden retriever mix who came into my life 4 years ago when he was abandoned, much like I was. We found each other at the local shelter, and his loyal companionship has been a constant source of comfort through some lonely nights. My chosen family has been equally important to my healing. Sarah, my best friend since 7th grade, has been my rock. When everyone else disappeared, her family took me in until I graduated high school. We still have dinner together every Wednesday, a tradition that has survived boyfriends, her marriage, and the birth of her 2 children who call me Auntie Nat. Then there is Kevin, my mentor in real estate, who saw potential in me when I was just a broke 19-year-old serving him coffee. His guidance helped me navigate the business world when I had no role models to follow. My therapist, Dr. Winters, deserves credit too. For 6 years, I worked through the abandonment issues and learned to trust again. The journey hasn't been easy. There were panic attacks in the early years, nights spent questioning my worth, and a persistent fear that everything I built could disappear in an instant. Through therapy, I learned that my hypervigilance and perfectionism were armor I built to protect myself after my father's betrayal. Dating has been complicated. I have had a few serious relationships, but my independence is something I guard fiercely. My last boyfriend couldn't understand why I refused to add his name to anything I owned, even after 2 years together. He called me untrusting. Maybe I am. But when you have had everything taken away once, you learn to protect what you rebuild. My community involvement has become another source of strength. I volunteer at a shelter for teens who have been displaced from their homes, understanding their situation better than most. Twice a month, I teach financial literacy workshops, helping these young people understand how to build credit, save money, and eventually become homeowners themselves. Giving back helps me make sense of my own journey. The stability of my routine grounds me. Sunday brunches on my deck, Monday strategy meetings with my team, Wednesday dinners with Sarah and her family, Friday movie nights with friends. This predictable rhythm is something I created for myself, a stark contrast to the chaos of my teenage years. I have built a good life, one sturdy brick at a time. So, When my doorbell rang that Sunday morning, I had no idea that the carefully constructed peace I had built was about to be disturbed by ghosts from my past. To understand the magnitude of what happened when my father appeared on my doorstep, you need to know where our story began. Before the betrayal, before the lies, we were once a happy family. My early childhood memories are filled with warmth. My mom, Eleanor, was a kindergarten teacher with a laugh that could fill an entire room. My father, Thomas, worked as an engineer at a local manufacturing plant. We lived in a modest three-bedroom home in a middle-class neighborhood with good schools and weekend barbecues with neighbors. Mom made every holiday magical. She would transform our home for each season, baking cookies that made the whole house smell like cinnamon and vanilla. Dad was the practical one, teaching me how to change a tire when I was 9 and explaining how the world worked in patient, logical terms. They balanced each other perfectly, and I never doubted I was loved. When I was 10, Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The next 8 months became a blur of hospital visits, the sharp smell of antiseptic, and watching my vibrant mother shrink before my eyes. Despite the pain, she remained focused on making memories with me. We made a memory box together, filling it with letters she wrote for my future milestones, recordings of her reading my favorite books, and small gifts she wanted me to have when she was gone. She died on a Tuesday in April. I remember the cherry blossoms were blooming outside her hospital room window. Dad held her hand on one side, and I held the other. Her last words to me were, "Find joy, Natalie, even when it seems impossible." Dad and I grieved together. We would sit on the back porch swing she loved, sometimes talking about Mom, sometimes sitting in silence with our shared loss. He kept all her photos up and made sure we still celebrated her birthday each year with her favorite chocolate cake. When I had nightmares, he would sit by my bed until I fell back asleep, just as he had when I was little. We developed new rituals. Sunday morning pancakes became our thing. Dad was terrible at first, burning the edges and undercooking the centers, but we laughed through his culinary disasters until eventually he mastered the perfect golden pancake. We started hiking on weekends, something Mom had always wanted to do, but never got the chance. In the wilderness, among the trees and alongside rushing streams, we both found moments of peace. Sarah became an even more important part of my life during this time. Her mom would often invite me over for dinner, understanding that Dad was doing his best, but sometimes a girl needed maternal energy. Sarah and I would stay up late talking about everything and nothing, and her steady presence kept me grounded when grief threatened to pull me under. For almost 2 years, it was just Dad and me figuring out our new normal. He started taking me to father-daughter dances at school, awkwardly learning to help me with my hair, and trying his best to answer questions about growing up that would have normally gone to Mom. We were a team, navigating our broken family with determination to honor Mom by finding joy, just as she had asked. When I was 12, Dad started occasionally going out in the evenings. He was always home by the time I went to bed, and Sarah's parents would stay with me. I understood he was lonely. Mom had been gone for over 2 years, and while I missed her every day, I wanted Dad to be happy. When he finally told me he had been seeing someone named Diane, I was cautiously optimistic. The look of nervous hope on his face made me want this to work for him. "She has a daughter about your age," he told me one night, over our Sunday pancakes. "Her name is Amanda. She's 15, just a year younger than you. Do you think we'll be friends?" I asked. "I hope so, sweetheart," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But no matter what happens with Diane, it will always be you and me. I promise." That promise would be broken in ways I couldn't have imagined when we had that conversation. But at that moment, I believed him completely. After all, we had weathered the worst storm of our lives together. Nothing could break the bond between us, or so I thought. The first time I met Diane, she brought homemade apple pie and complimented the Science Fair award displayed on our bookshelf. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, carefully applied makeup, and a warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. She asked questions about school and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Her daughter Amanda hung back, examining our family photos with a guarded expression. Amanda was petite with her mother's blonde hair and a permanent pout. When I tried to show her my room, she followed reluctantly, offering only one-word answers to my questions. I attributed her coldness to the awkwardness of the situation and kept trying, showing her my book collection and the telescope Dad had given me for my birthday. "My mom says your dad makes good money," she said suddenly, running her finger along my dresser. "I guess. He works really hard," I replied, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "We've moved 3 times since my dad left," she continued. "Maybe now we can stay in one place." In retrospect, that comment was my first warning, but I was too naive to recognize it. The courtship moved quickly. Within 6 months, Dad proposed. I found out when they came home one night, Diane flashing a diamond ring, and both of them flushed with happiness. I pushed down my unease and hugged them both, telling myself that Dad deserved this second chance at love. They married in a small ceremony at a local hotel. I was a junior bridesmaid, wearing a blue dress that Diane had selected. During the reception, I overheard Amanda telling a cousin, "My mom always gets what she wants. Always." The triumphant edge in her voice sent a chill through me. Everything changed after they returned from their weekend honeymoon. Diane and Amanda moved into our house, bringing carloads of belongings that somehow took precedence over our existing things. Mom's reading chair was relegated to the basement to make room for Diane's larger armchair. Family photos were rearranged, with many of Mom's pictures disappearing from common areas, now only found in my room and Dad's office. Diane established new household rules. Chores were divided, but somehow I always had more responsibilities than Amanda. When I pointed this out, Diane would smile tightly and say, "Amanda struggles with her asthma, sweetie. We need to be understanding." Yet, Amanda's asthma never seemed to prevent her from joining the school swim team or spending hours at the mall with friends. The dynamic with Dad shifted subtly at first, then more dramatically. Before Diane, he would help me with homework at the kitchen table. Now, he was often occupied with Amanda's latest crisis or Diane's requests. Our Sunday pancake tradition faded away, replaced by Diane's preference for church, followed by brunch at a local restaurant where she could showcase her perfect new family. "Your father and I feel that Amanda needs more attention right now," Diane explained when I asked why Dad had missed my science competition. "The divorce was very hard on her, and she's still adjusting. You're so independent, Natalie. It's one of the things we love about you." Independence became a double-edged sword. Being self-sufficient meant being overlooked. While Dad attended all of Amanda's swim meets, he made it to fewer and fewer of my events. Diane would smooth over his absences with explanations that always positioned Amanda's needs as more urgent than mine. Then came the small incidents. Money missing from my desk drawer, a torn page in a book Mom had given me. My school project mysteriously damaged the night before it was due. When I raised these issues, Diane would sigh and say, "Teenagers are always so dramatic. It must be hard being an only child for so long." Amanda's attitude toward me oscillated between cold indifference and active hostility. In front of Dad, she would make efforts at sisterly bonding, suggesting we watch movies together or offering to braid my hair. As soon as he left the room, she would abandon these activities, often with a cutting remark. "He feels sorry for you because your mom died," she told me once while we were alone in the kitchen. "That's the only reason he pays attention to you at all." I tried telling Dad about these comments, but he brushed them off as normal sibling adjustment. Give her time, Natalie. This is new for everyone. The gaslighting became more frequent. Items would disappear from my room, only to be found in my backpack or under my bed, making me look careless or forgetful. Conversations I was certain we'd had were denied entirely. We never said you could go to Sarah's this weekend. You must have dreamed it, Diane would insist, while Dad looked on with confusion. Despite the increasingly toxic home environment, I maintained my grades, focusing on school as both an escape and a potential ticket to freedom through college scholarships. I kept detailed records of my belongings and conversations in a journal I hid under my mattress, trying to maintain my grip on reality when everything I said was questioned. Sarah remained my lifeline, the one person who witnessed the before and after of our family dynamic. Your stepmom is manipulative, she observed after spending an afternoon at our house. The way she acts when your dad is watching versus when he's not around is seriously messed up. By the time I was 16, home had transformed from a sanctuary to a battleground where I was constantly on the defensive. I walked on eggshells, trying to avoid giving Diane or Amanda any ammunition to use against me. Dad had become a shadow of the man who had once been my closest ally, now so entranced by his new wife that he could barely see what was happening right in front of him. I still loved him desperately and kept trying to reconnect, leaving notes in his lunchbox like Mom used to do, or asking about his day when we had rare moments alone. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of our old relationship, but they were fleeting, always interrupted by Diane's needs or Amanda's demands. I held on to hope that things would improve, that Dad would eventually see through the manipulation. But instead, everything came to a catastrophic head one autumn evening when I returned home from study group to find my life about to implode. The evening that shattered my world began ordinarily enough. I had been at the library with my advanced placement study group, working on a chemistry project. Sarah's mom dropped me off around 8:30, and I walked into a house filled with unusual tension. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. Dad sat at the kitchen table, his face drawn and angry in a way I had rarely seen. Diane stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, in a gesture that seemed both comforting and possessive. Amanda lingered in the doorway to the living room, arms crossed with an expression that flickered between nervousness and something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. "Where have you been?" Dad demanded, his voice tight. "At the library with my study group. I told you this morning, and Mrs. Parker just dropped me off," I replied, confusion growing. I had followed all the rules, even texting when we decided to stay an extra hour. "We need to talk about what we found in your room," Diane said, her voice carrying a rehearsed quality. My stomach dropped. "You were in my room? Why?" "Don't change the subject," Dad snapped. "Diane was putting away laundry and noticed your drawer wasn't closing properly." This was the first red flag. Diane had never put away my laundry. That had always been my responsibility since she moved in. When I tried to fix it, Diane continued smoothly. I found something very disturbing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wad of cash, fanning out several $100 bills on the table. $2,000 in total, I would later learn. "Recognize this?" she asked. I shook my head. "Number. That's not mine." "It was hidden under your socks," Diane countered. "And coincidentally, it's exactly the amount that's missing from my purse. The money I withdrew yesterday for Amanda's school ski trip." My mind raced. I had never seen that money before. I had never taken anything from Diane or anyone else. "I didn't take it," I said firmly. "I've been at school and then the library all day." "You could have taken it any time yesterday or this morning," Diane replied. "You knew I got the cash for Amanda's trip. You were there when I mentioned it at breakfast." I looked at Dad, expecting him to at least consider that I might be telling the truth. Instead, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen directed at me before: distrust. "We also found this," he said quietly, pushing a small gold bracelet across the table. My breath caught. It was Diane's bracelet, one she often complained about losing and finding again. I had seen her wearing it just days ago. "That's not mine either," I said, my voice rising with panic. "Dad, you know I wouldn't steal. You know me." "I thought I did," he replied, and those 4 words cut deeper than anything else could have. "There's more," Diane added. She produced a small notebook where she had apparently been documenting missing items over the past few months. Small amounts of cash, a pair of earrings, Amanda's allowance money, all allegedly found in my possession. "This is insane," I protested, tears building. "I'm being set up." Amanda spoke then, her voice carrying a perfect note of injured innocence. "Why would anyone set you up? You've always been jealous that Mom and I moved in. You make comments about my stuff all the time." "That's not true." "But 3 against 1 is impossible odds, especially when one of the 3 is the parent you trusted most in the world." The argument escalated, with me continuing to deny the accusations, while Diane presented more evidence of my supposed thievery. Dad grew increasingly angry, not at the situation, but at me specifically, as if my denials were more offensive than the alleged crime. "I've tried to be patient with you," he said eventually. "I know you've been struggling with the changes in our family, but this has gone too far." "I didn't do this," I repeated, my voice breaking. "Dad, please believe me. I would never steal." He shook his head, disappointment radiating from him. "The evidence is right here, Natalie. If you can't be honest, how can we trust you under our roof?" The ultimatum came next, delivered by my father with Diane whispering in his ear. "You have 2 choices," he said. "You can admit what you've done, apologize to Diane and Amanda, return everything you've taken, and accept being grounded for the next 3 months. Or—" He paused, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Doubt, regret. Whatever it wasn't strong enough. "Or you can continue to deny it, and you'll need to leave this house." The words hung in the air, impossible and devastating. 16 years old, and my father was threatening to throw me out over a lie. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Dead serious," he replied. "I won't have a thief in my house, especially one who refuses to take responsibility." I looked at each of their faces. Amanda couldn't quite hide her smirk. Diane maintained a mask of sad disappointment. And Dad, my champion, my protector, looked like a stranger. In that moment, something broke inside me. If I admitted to a lie, I would lose myself. If I maintained my innocence, I would lose my home and my father. An impossible choice for a 16-year-old, but somehow the decision was crystal clear. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "And I won't say I did." Dad's jaw tightened. "Then you need to pack your things." I stood there, stunned by the finality of it. "You're choosing them over me." "You've chosen dishonesty," he countered. "You've left me no choice." I ran upstairs to my room, which had already been violated by their search. With shaking hands, I pulled out my school backpack and a duffel bag. What does a 16-year-old take when their life is being uprooted? I grabbed practical things: clothes, toiletries, my school notebooks. Then, the irreplaceable. The memory box from Mom, photos of happier times, the journal where I documented the past 2 years of gaslighting. As I packed, rain began to fall outside, a perfect backdrop to the destruction of my world. I could hear them talking downstairs, Diane's voice soothing, probably convincing Dad he was doing the right thing, that I needed to learn a lesson. I called Sarah, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial. Through tears, I explained what was happening. Her mother answered instead, horror in her voice as she assured me they were on their way. When I came back downstairs with my bags, Dad stood by the door. For a moment, I thought he might reconsider, might remember the promise he made over pancakes 4 years earlier. Instead, he stepped aside. "Where will you go?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Sarah's," I replied. "Not that you care." "Natalie," he began, but Diane appeared beside him. "You've made your choice," she said firmly. "Perhaps some time away will help you reflect on your actions." I looked at my father one last time. "Mom would be ashamed of you right now." It was a cruel thing to say, but in that moment, I believed it with my whole heart. I stepped out into the rain, hearing the door close firmly behind me. I stood on the porch of what had been my home my entire life, rain soaking through my jacket, waiting for Sarah's parents to arrive. That night, in Sarah's bedroom, I cried until there were no tears left. Her parents assured me I could stay as long as needed, but we all knew this wasn't a temporary situation. Something fundamental had broken, and there would be no going back to the way things were before. In the days that followed, I expected Dad to call, to come to his senses. He didn't. I returned to school, facing whispers and stares as news of my situation spread. The guidance counselor helped me understand my options as a minor who had been effectively abandoned. Sarah's parents considered seeking temporary guardianship, but worried about legal battles with my father. A week after being thrown out, I received a box on Sarah's doorstep. Inside were more of my belongings, packed haphazardly. At the bottom was a note in Dad's handwriting. "When you're ready to admit what you did and apologize, we can discuss you coming home." There was no apology for his disbelief, no acknowledgement of the magnitude of his betrayal, just a continued assumption of my guilt. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my mom's memory box, alongside a bank statement I had found while packing. A statement showing Diane had withdrawn exactly $2,000 the day before, accusing me of stealing it. Evidence I had discovered too late, but would keep for 15 years, waiting for the day the truth might finally matter. The months following my expulsion from home were a crash course in adult responsibility. Sarah's parents, John and Margaret Parker, became my lifeline. They converted their home office into a bedroom for me and helped me navigate the complicated legal situation of being a minor not living with my legal guardian. "You can stay with us through graduation," John assured me. "We've spoken to a lawyer friend. Your father hasn't legally abandoned you since he's still providing some financial support, but he's on thin ice legally." Dad had begun sending the Parkers a check each month, a tacit acknowledgement that he had abdicated his parental responsibilities but wanted to avoid legal consequences. Never once did he call or visit. I learned later that Diane had convinced him that I needed tough love and would eventually break down and confess. I threw myself into school with renewed determination. If education had been important before, it was now my only path to true independence. I maintained straight, as while working 20 hours a week at a local cafe to contribute to the Parker household and save for my uncertain future. The guidance counselor at school became another advocate, helping me apply for every scholarship available. "Your personal essay about overcoming adversity is one of the most powerful I've read," she told me, eyes brimming with empathy. "Colleges will see your resilience, Natalie." Graduation day arrived with mixed emotions. Pride in my accomplishments and 4 substantial scholarships to the state university, but also the ache of looking out at the audience and not seeing my father there. I had sent him an invitation, against the advice of everyone who cared about me. He didn't come, didn't acknowledge it. Instead, I had the Parkers, Sarah, and several teachers cheering loudly as I accepted my diploma and the Academic Achievement Award. That summer, I found a tiny apartment with a roommate, another scholarship student named Jessica. The place was shabby with unreliable heating and paper-thin walls, but it was the first space that was truly mine. I worked 2 jobs, saving every penny possible for textbooks and the expenses my scholarships wouldn't cover. It was at one of those jobs, serving coffee at a local cafe, that I met Kevin Reynolds. He was a regular customer, always ordering the same thing: large black coffee, blueberry muffin, easy smile. He was in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that noticed things others missed. "You look exhausted today," he commented one morning after I had stayed up all night finishing a paper. "College student?" "That obvious?" I managed a tired smile. I recognized the look. "Business major?" I nodded, with a minor in finance. "Smart combination." He took his change and then, unexpectedly, handed me a business card. "My real estate office needs a part-time receptionist. Better pay than coffee shops, more regular hours. Think about it." That business card changed the trajectory of my life. Working at Reynolds Realty taught me about more than answering phones and scheduling appointments. Kevin became a mentor, taking time to explain the business of real estate from the ground up. "You have a natural talent for this," he told me, after I had been there 6 months, and he overheard me talking to a walk-in client. "You listen well, and you have an instinct for matching people to properties." By my junior year of college, I was working nearly full-time at the agency while maintaining my course load. Kevin encouraged me to get my real estate license, even paying for the required courses as a birthday gift. "Consider it an investment in my business," he said when I protested. "You'll pay me back by bringing in clients." I passed the licensing exam on my first attempt and sold my first house 2 months later, a small starter home to a young couple not much older than myself. The commission was more money than I had ever seen at once, enough to move out of the shabby apartment into a slightly better one-bedroom place of my own. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my father. Occasional emails updating him on major life events were met with brief, formal responses. I knew from mutual acquaintances that Diane and Amanda were still in the picture, that Amanda had dropped out of community college and was working retail jobs while living at home. I tried not to care, tried not to compare our diverging paths, but human nature made it impossible not to note the irony. At 23, I made a bold decision. Using my savings and a first-time homebuyer program, I purchased a small one-bedroom condo. It needed work, with outdated appliances and carpet that had seen better days, but the moment I signed the papers, something healed in me. I had a home again, one that no one could take away. "You realize you own property before most of your college professors, right?" Kevin joked as we celebrated with champagne in plastic cups, sitting on the floor of my empty new living room. "I'm just getting started," I replied, and I meant it. The next 7 years were a blur of 18-hour days, building my client base and reputation in the industry. I expanded from residential to commercial properties, studied market trends obsessively, and reinvested most of my earnings. When Kevin decided to retire at 65, he offered me the chance to buy his agency. "You've been running it in all but name for the past 2 years anyway," he said. "It should be yours." At 29, I became the owner of what was now called Parker Reynolds Realty, honoring both Kevin and the family that had taken me in when I had nothing. The business thrived under my leadership, growing from 3 agents to 8, with a focus on ethical practices that earned us loyal clients. My personal healing was slower than my professional success. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Winters helped me process the abandonment and betrayal. "You've built extraordinary external success," she observed. "Now we need to work on believing you deserve it." The fear that everything could disappear remained my constant companion. I maintained emergency funds, backup plans for my backup plans, and struggled to fully trust romantic partners. My longest relationship lasted 2 years before falling apart over my reluctance to combine finances or consider joint property ownership. "I love you," Michael had said during our final argument, "but you keep part of yourself locked away. You're still living like someone might pull the rug out from under you at any moment." He wasn't wrong. The 16-year-old girl who had packed her life into a backpack and duffel bag still lived somewhere inside me, hypervigilant and waiting for the next betrayal. The purchase of my current home at 30 was another milestone in my healing journey. The beautiful craftsman represented not just financial success, but a declaration that I was putting down roots, creating the stability I had lost. I spent months renovating it, making every detail exactly what I wanted. This was the home I had dreamed of during those nights in Sarah's guest room and the shabby college apartment, a tangible manifestation of how far I had come. Through mutual connections, I occasionally heard updates about my father and his family. Dad had taken early retirement due to health issues. Amanda had married young, had 2 children, and was now going through a messy divorce. Diane was as controlling as ever, now focusing her manipulations on Amanda's children, her grandchildren. I made several attempts over the years to reconnect with Dad, motivated more by Dr. Winter's encouragement than my own desire. A card on his 60th birthday went unacknowledged. An email when I heard about his health problems received a terse "I'm fine" in response. After a while, I stopped trying, accepting that the father I had loved existed only in my memories. The irony wasn't lost on me that the daughter he had thrown away had built a successful life through her own efforts, while the stepdaughter he had chosen was struggling despite years of his support. But I took no pleasure in Amanda's difficulties. Life had taught me that carrying resentment only weighs down the person holding it. So when my doorbell rang that Sunday morning, I had no inkling that the past I had worked so hard to overcome was about to come full circle in the most unexpected way. The doorbell chimed just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Cooper barked once, more announcement than alarm, his tail wagging as it always did when visitors arrived. I wasn't expecting anyone, but Sunday morning drop-ins from friends weren't unusual in our close-knit neighborhood. I padded to the door in bare feet, still wearing yoga pants and an oversized university sweatshirt from my alma mater. When I pulled the door open, the coffee mug nearly slipped from my fingers. Thomas Wilson, my father, stood on my front porch. 15 years had aged him considerably. His once dark hair was now completely gray, his tall frame slightly stooped, face lined with deep creases around eyes that still held the blue I saw in my own mirror each morning. Beside him stood Amanda, no longer the smirking teenager but a woman near my age. Her blonde hair was styled in an expensive cut, her makeup carefully applied, but stress had left its mark in the tightness around her mouth and the calculating look that hadn't changed since childhood. Natalie. Dad's voice was rougher than I remembered, uncertainty threading through my name. I stood frozen, a tidal wave of emotions crashing through me. Shock, anger, grief, and beneath it all, a tremor of that childish hope that had never completely died, that he had finally come to make things right. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, not moving from the doorway. "Can we come in, please?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the neighbor across the street who was walking her dog and watching our interaction with undisguised curiosity. Self-preservation told me to close the door, to protect the life I had built from these people who had shattered my world once before. But curiosity won out. After 15 years, I wanted to know what could possibly have brought them to my door. 10 minutes, I said, stepping back to allow them entry. They walked into my home, both of them taking in the hardwood floors, the tasteful furnishings, the obvious signs of financial comfort. Cooper approached cautiously, sensing my tension. I rested my hand on his head, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Beautiful home," Dad commented awkwardly, standing in my living room like a stranger, which I supposed he was. "Thank you. I worked hard for it." My voice was cooler than the morning air outside. "Why are you here?" Amanda spoke for the first time. "You've done well for yourself." The undercurrent in her tone was familiar, that same resentment that had colored our teenage interactions. Some things hadn't changed. Again, "Why are you here?" I remained standing, not offering them seats or refreshments, not playing the role of hostess when they had forfeited any right to my hospitality years ago. Dad cleared his throat. "We heard about your success, your real estate company, this house in this neighborhood." He trailed off. "And?" I prompted. "And we wanted to reconnect," he finished, unconvincingly. "After 15 years? Try again." Amanda stepped forward. "I'm going through a divorce." This information wasn't surprising. Through our one remaining mutual acquaintance, I had heard rumors of her marital problems months ago. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, the polite response automatic rather than heartfelt. "It's been difficult," she continued, "especially for the kids. Jason is 7 and Emma is 5. I nodded, unsure where this was heading, but increasingly certain I wouldn't like the destination. "We had to move out of our house," Amanda added. "We're staying with Dad and Diane for now, but it's crowded. The kids are sharing a room that's really more of a converted office. Dad took over. We've been trying to help them get back on their feet. Amanda's ex isn't reliable with child support, and she's trying to go back to school to get a degree." The pieces were starting to come together, but I still couldn't quite believe where this conversation seemed to be heading. "What does any of this have to do with me?" I asked directly. They exchanged glances before Dad spoke again. "We know you have this big house. You live alone, except for the dog, and Amanda needs a stable place for the children." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "Are you seriously here to ask me for money?" I finally asked. "Not money," Amanda said quickly. "This house. We thought maybe you could let us live here, or even sign it over. You must have other properties through your business." The audacity stole my breath. 15 years of silence, of abandonment, and they had come to ask for my home? The home I had sacrificed and worked 80-hour weeks to afford? "You want me to give you my house?" I repeated, certain I must have misunderstood. Dad at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Not give, exactly. Maybe you could move to a smaller place? You don't need all this space for just yourself. Amanda has the children to consider." "And family should help family," Amanda added, with breathtaking hypocrisy. A laugh escaped me, sharp and disbelieving. "Family? Is that what we are?" "Blood is blood," Dad said quietly, "despite everything." "Despite everything?" I echoed. "Despite you throwing your 16-year-old daughter out of her home over a lie? Despite never once calling to check if I was safe, if I had enough to eat, if I needed anything during all these years? Despite missing my graduation, my college degree, every milestone of my adult life?" Dad shifted his weight, discomfort evident. "We all made mistakes." "No," I corrected. "You made a choice. I was just a child dealing with the consequences of that choice." Amanda interjected. "That was all so long ago. We should move past it for the sake of the children." The calculated mention of her children, these unknown niece and nephew who were now being used as emotional leverage, ignited a slow burning fury in me. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You want me to give up my home, which I worked for and earned entirely on my own, to the people who threw me away when I was a child, based on an appeal to family loyalty that you never showed me?" When you put it like that, Dad began, but I cut him off. How else should I put it? Please, enlighten me. Amanda's facade of politeness slipped. You've always been selfish, Natalie, always thinking about yourself. Meanwhile, I have 2 children who need stability. Selfish? I repeated, incredulous. I was homeless at 16 because of you and your mother. Everything I have, I built from nothing after you took everything from me. That's ancient history, she dismissed. You're clearly doing fine now. Better than fine. You could easily afford another place. That's not the point, I countered. This is my home. Mine. I don't owe you anything. Dad tried a different approach. I know things ended badly between us. Ended badly? I interrupted. Things didn't end badly. You chose to believe I was a thief without evidence. You chose your new wife over your daughter. You abandoned me. I sent money to the Parkers, he defended weakly. The bare minimum to avoid legal consequences, I corrected. Never enough to actually support me. Never with a call or visit to see how I was doing. An uncomfortable silence fell. I could see them recalculating, trying to find the angle that would get them what they wanted. I understand you're still hurt, Dad finally said. But don't punish the children for past mistakes. Something in me snapped at the manipulation. Don't you dare use those children as pawns. If you cared about them having stability, you would have helped Amanda create that herself, not come begging for my house. We're not begging, Amanda said sharply. We thought you might want to make up for the favoritism Dad showed you when we were younger. The statement was so divorced from reality that I actually laughed. Favoritism? Are you delusional? He chose you and your mother over me. He threw me out of my home for you. Only after you stole from us, she shot back. And there it was. After 15 years, they still maintained the lie. Still believed I deserved what had happened to me. I never stole anything, I said quietly, and I think you both know that. A flicker of something crossed Amanda's face, too quick to interpret, but Dad looked away, unable to meet my eyes. It doesn't matter now, he muttered. Water under the bridge. It matters to me, I insisted. It's the reason we're standing here having this conversation after 15 years of silence. It's the reason I had to build my life from scratch, while you continued supporting Amanda well into adulthood. Fine, Amanda snapped. Maybe you didn't steal the money. Maybe I moved it. Does that make you happy to hear after all this time? It doesn't change anything now. Her casual admission of what I had known all along, delivered without remorse or apology, lit a fire in my chest. All those years of doubt, of wondering if anyone would ever believe me, crystallized into perfect clarity. It changes everything, I said softly, but not in the way you think. I took a deep breath, centering myself in the present moment. Cooper pressed against my leg, a steady, grounding presence, as I faced the ghosts of my past standing in my living room. Wait here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I walked to my home office, a sunny room overlooking the backyard garden. In the bottom drawer of my desk was a fireproof box containing my most important documents, property deeds, insurance policies, my mother's memory box, and a sealed envelope I had carried with me through 6 moves over 15 years. When I returned to the living room, Dad and Amanda were whispering to each other, falling silent as I entered. I placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. What's that? Dad asked. Evidence, I replied simply. Evidence I've kept for 15 years, waiting for this moment, though I never really believed it would come. I removed 2 documents from the envelope. The first was a bank statement, yellowed with age, but still legible. This is a statement from your joint account with Diane. I told Dad. See the withdrawal on October 14th? $2,000, the exact amount I was accused of stealing the next day. Dad stared at the paper, confusion evident. How did you get this? It was mixed in with my school papers. I found it while I was packing the night you threw me out. Too late to change what was happening, but I kept it anyway. I laid the second document beside it. This is a transcript of a conversation I had with Amanda 3 years after I left. She admitted the whole thing then, though she didn't know I was recording it. Amanda's face flushed with anger. You recorded me without permission? That's illegal. Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording. And frankly, after what you did to me, I'm not particularly concerned with your definition of right and wrong. Dad picked up the transcript, scanning the highlighted sections where Amanda had bragged about planting the money and bracelet in my room, about convincing her mother to go along with the plan to finally get rid of the competition. Is this true? He asked Amanda, his voice hollow. She tossed her head defiantly. We were kids. I was jealous. Mom said you always put Natalie first, that we needed to break your attachment to her. The confirmation hung in the air between us. Dad sank onto my couch without invitation, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. Diane knew? He asked, voice barely audible. Of course she knew, Amanda replied impatiently. It was her idea. She said you were too blind when it came to your precious daughter. I watched my father absorb this information, the knowledge that he had been manipulated by his wife, that he had discarded his daughter over a deliberate lie. Part of me had imagined this moment for years, had fantasized about the satisfaction of seeing him face the truth. The reality was more complicated, a mixture of vindication and renewed grief for what we had lost. All this time, he murmured. All these years. Yes, I said simply. All these years. He looked up at me, eyes swimming with tears. Natalie, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. The apology I had waited 15 years to hear landed with surprising emptiness. It was too little, too late, a Band-Aid offered for an amputation. Sorry doesn't rebuild what was destroyed, I said quietly. Sorry doesn't give me back the years of having a father. We can start over, he suggested, desperation edging his voice. Now that I know the truth? Amanda interrupted, her tone sharp. This doesn't change our current situation. You can feel bad about the past all you want, Dad, but we still need a place to live. Natalie still has this house she doesn't need. Her persistent entitlement in the face of her exposed lies was almost impressive in its audacity. You still don't get it, I told her. This house represents everything I built after you and your mother destroyed my life. Every brick, every floorboard was paid for with my sweat and determination. It is the physical manifestation of my survival despite what you did to me. I turned to my father. And you? You stand there and offer apologies as if words could possibly bridge the chasm between us. Where were you when I was struggling to find a place to live after high school? Where were you when I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college? Where were you for every birthday, every Christmas, every moment I achieved something and had no parent to share it with? Dad seemed to physically shrink under my questions, I thought. Diane convinced me that tough love was the only way to reach you, that you would admit what you'd done eventually. And when I didn't, when years passed and I maintained my innocence, did you ever once consider that maybe, just maybe, your daughter was telling the truth? He had no answer for that. Amanda tried a different tactic. Look, what happened was terrible. I admit that. We were awful to you. But my children are innocent in all this. They need a stable home. Then provide one for them, I replied. The way I had to provide for myself when I was hardly more than a child. It's not that simple, she argued. The job market is tough. Childcare is expensive. I'm well aware of the challenges, I cut her off. I faced them alone at 16. You're 31 with family support. Figure it out. So you won't help at all? Dad asked, a hint of the old authority creeping into his voice. After everything I did for you growing up? The audacity of his question left me momentarily speechless. Everything you did for me? I finally managed. You mean fulfilling your basic legal obligation as a parent until I was 16, and then abandoning me? Should I be grateful for that bare minimum effort? I wasn't perfect, he conceded, but I loved you. I still love you. The words I had once longed to hear now rang hollow. Love isn't a feeling, Dad. It's a series of actions. It's showing up. It's believing in your child. It's supporting them even when it's difficult. By any measurable standard, you stopped loving me the night you chose to believe I was a thief. Amanda stood abruptly. This is getting us nowhere. Are you going to help us or not? I looked at her, really looked at the woman who had been at the center of the destruction of my family. There was no remorse in her expression, no real acknowledgement of the damage she had caused, just impatience that her plan to benefit from my success wasn't proceeding as expected. Not a single inch of this house will ever belong to you, I said calmly. Not the smallest corner, not for a day, not for an hour. This is my home, paid for with the life I built after you destroyed my first one. You're still that same selfish girl, Amanda spat. And you're still the entitled one who never faced consequences for her actions, I replied. Some things don't change. I turned to my father. I think it's time for you both to leave. He stood shakily, looking lost in the home of the daughter he barely knew. Natalie, please, we can work through this, now that I know the truth. The truth was always there, I interrupted. You chose not to see it. You chose Diane and Amanda over me, over and over again. And now you're here, not because you missed me or wanted to make amends, but because you want something from me. That's not fair, he protested weakly. None of this has been fair, I agreed. But unlike you, I've stopped expecting life to be fair. I've built my own justice, my own security, my own family of people who actually show up for me. I moved toward the front door, making it clear our conversation was over. Amanda stomped out first, muttering about my selfishness. Dad lingered, looking back at me with pleading eyes. Can I at least have your number? Maybe we could talk again, when things are less emotional? I considered his request, weighing the child in me who still longed for her father against the woman who had learned to protect herself from those who would harm her. No, I said finally. I spent years reaching out to you, trying to maintain some connection. You ignored every attempt. You don't get to waltz back into my life when it's convenient for you or when you want something from me. I made a terrible mistake, he admitted. Yes, you did, and mistakes have consequences. This is yours. As he stepped onto the porch, he turned one last time. I really am sorry, Natalie. I nodded, acknowledging his words without accepting them as enough. Goodbye, Dad. I closed the door, leaning against it as the sound of their car starting and driving away filtered through the windows. Cooper nudged my hand with his nose, sensitive to my distress. I slid down to sit on the floor, burying my face in his soft fur as 15 years of bottled emotions finally broke free. I cried for the 16-year-old girl in the rain, for the father I had lost, for the family we might have been in a world without Diane and Amanda's manipulation. And finally, I cried in relief that the truth I had carried alone for so long had finally been spoken aloud. When the tears subsided, I called Sarah, who arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and unwavering support. We sat on my deck, the same place I had been peacefully enjoying my morning before my past came crashing back. Are you okay? She asked, after I recounted the entire confrontation. I think I will be, I replied honestly. It wasn't the closure I imagined, but maybe it was the closure I needed. I always thought vindication would feel better. Vindication doesn't heal the original wound, she observed. It just confirms you weren't crazy. We sat in comfortable silence, watching birds in the garden. You know what's ironic? I finally said. After all these years of wondering if he would ever acknowledge the truth, it turns out it doesn't really matter anymore. I built this life without him. His opinion stopped being essential to my happiness a long time ago. The following week, I made a substantial donation to the youth shelter, where I volunteered, specifically earmarked for emergency housing for teens in crisis situations. I couldn't change my own past, but I could help create better outcomes for others facing similar circumstances. I also scheduled an extra session with Dr. Winters, working through the complex emotions the confrontation had stirred up. You've come full circle, she noted. How does it feel to have stood your ground? Empowering, I admitted. For so long, I was that scared teenager being thrown out of her home. Facing them as an adult, on my terms, in my own home, shifted something fundamental in how I see myself in relation to them. Life settled back into its rhythm. My business continued to thrive. Cooper and I took our morning runs. I had dinner with Sarah's family and movie nights with friends. Gradually, the confrontation with Dad and Amanda took its place as just another event in my history. Significant, but no longer defining. 3 months later, a card arrived in the mail with a local postmark. Inside was a brief note from my father, including his phone number and an open invitation to call if I ever wanted to talk. No demands, no guilt, just an open door. I placed it in my desk drawer, neither accepting nor rejecting the possibility. The choice was mine now, and that made all the difference. My home remained my sanctuary, every corner filled with the life I had created for myself. Not a single inch would ever belong to those who had betrayed me, but every inch told the story of my resilience, my determination, and ultimately, my triumph. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family members who took you for granted and then expected you to help them? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no to toxic people, even when they're family. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve to protect the life you've worked hard to build.